Total War Warhammer 2, one of the latest installments in Total War strategy game series, and the sequel to Total War Warhammer 1. The sequel came out in 2017, a little more than a year after release of the original, and it was actually received with almost universal appraisal, with some minor gripes. But in this video, we're gonna answer the question whether it is worth it to purchase right now, today, years down the line, or whether you just ignore it and avoid it. This is actually the second video from a two-part series talking about the Total War Warhammer games. In a previous video, we talked about Total War Warhammer 1 and why you should purchase it. Today, we're gonna talk about its sequel, of course. And to not waste any more of your time, and if you want a really straightforward answer, which we usually give it to you as soon as possible, Total War Warhammer 2 is absolutely worth it to purchase. If you played the first game and you liked it, this game is simply better in every aspect. If you have ever played any of the Total War games in the past and don't mind the fantasy setting, you're gonna enjoy and love this game, and this game is absolutely worth it. And overall, if you love strategy games, you're gonna find a lot of enjoyment from this amazing sequel. But let's get more into details. Why Total War Warhammer 2 is actually a good game and how it actually plays. To be fair, in essence, the sequel is almost identical to original, and if you don't look very closely, you might even mistaken these games with each other. Gameplay wise, it's practically the same. You start a campaign, choose a faction, but this time you choose directly the lords of the faction. You don't choose the faction first and then the lord, you just choose a lord. You go into your campaign map, control your troops, control your cities, build up your armies, build up your economy, build up your relationships, and when the battle time will come, you take direct control of your army and battle it on a 3D map in real time. Even if you have played the first game, you're gonna feel exactly the same way here. But the game is actually pretty different in its setting. If in the first game your campaign was actually happening in so-called Old World, which encompassed the analog of Europe and North Africa, here you play in so-called New World. And New World encompasses North and South America, some kind of analog of Atlantis, and since the Tomb Kings expansion, it also encompasses the continent of Africa. Well, at least they're Warhammer Fantasy analogs of them. The campaign is actually called an Eye of a Vortex, and your goal is basically to fight over the control of a magical vortex, which is in the middle of some kind of Atlantis island. And to be fair, this campaign is actually pretty interesting and pretty fun, and it's actually pretty great to have a single goal to go towards and see how all the other factions are trying to do the same thing as you are. Faction-wise, if you don't own the first game and if you didn't buy any of the DLCs, you're gonna have an access to 4 basic factions. You can play as a High Elves, which is, well, basically a fantasy trope of elves with all its discipline, very highly trained armies, and very beautiful architecture, and all the beautiful armors, and etc, etc. You play as a Dark Elves, which is basically an opposite of High Elves and more edgy type of High Elves. You can also play as a Lizard Man, which is based around the Mesoamerican culture, like Aztecs, for example, and has insanely interesting game mechanics with its geometric webs and the rampaging, which is insanely interesting and insanely fun to play. And in short, rampaging is when at some point you might actually lose the control of your troops and they go into rampage state, killing everybody, which is incredibly interesting and incredibly fun. And the last but not least are Skaven. Skaven are basically the Rat Man, the horde of humanoid rats that just overwhelm everyone with their sheer numbers and can actually build entire cities under already existing cities without anyone ever noticing, which is insanely interesting and insanely fun to play. The factions in the sequel are very interesting, except maybe like very generic High Elves, which is still fun to play. The other races have their own unique gameplay mechanics the same way as an original game did. What if you want to play with the factions from the original games? What if you want to play with the vampires, or maybe you want to play with an empire or with the dwarves or greenskins? Well, again, it's all behind the DLCs, as well as Tomb Kings, which are basically Egyptian undead armies. But everything changes if you own the first game. And as I mentioned in a review of the first game, welcome to the Mortal Empires. Mortal Empires is a completely separate campaign which is free for you to use and download if you own both first and the second games. Mortal Empires is a completely separate campaign which actually unites both old and new worlds in one gigantic, a little bit squished map. And I mean squished, it's actually a bit more literally squished compared to its original counterparts. Just to be able to fit each gigantic world into one map. So in a Mortal Empires campaign, you can literally play with every single faction from the first and from the second games. And if you own the DLCs for the first games and for the second games, you can play with those factions as well on the Mortal Empires campaign. And Mortal Empires is actually the definitive way to play this game. If you ever wanted to play with an empire and to be able to control Karl France in the New World, well, you can actually do that in Immortal Empires, of course. And it is actually the best way to play this game. So what about the DLCs? Again, the same way as in the first game, the DLCs are actually used to unlock the ability with the different factions. No matter whether you get the DLCs or not, these factions will still exist in the game. For example, in the case of the Tomb Kings, all the Tomb Kings and all their territories will still exist in the game whether you own the DLCs or not. And the same way will go for the Mortal Empire races and factions and all the heroes as well. And to be fair, I cannot break down all the DLCs, and if you want to find out information about all the DLCs, about all the factions, I highly suggest you to watch Mandalore Gaming's review of Total War Warhammer 2. You've probably already seen this. This is giant 1 hour plus game review, and he also has detailed reviews of almost all the DLCs. I think he has the reviews of all the DLCs of this game. So what about the pricing? How much will it cost you to actually get this game? Base game is available on Steam for the base price of $59.99 for the tier 1 countries and $46.99 for tier 2 countries. But it's often on a sale, and it can go as low as $20 for tier 1 countries and $10 for tier 2 countries. Should you get this game for a full price or wait for a sale? Now, of course, getting the game cheaper is better, but this time the game is actually absolutely blast to play if you will get this even for the full price. Now, I'm actually not the fan of buying the games for the full price, and I almost never do. But this time, this game was actually one of the only games that I actually bought for the full price in 2017. And did I regret this? Absolutely not. I enjoyed every single second of the gameplay, and I'm pretty sure you will enjoy it too. Now, if you're watching this during sales, then 100% go and get the game, and if you enjoy it, play a few hours. If you enjoy it, just go and get the DLCs that you feel like you will enjoy as well. If you're not watching this during any sales, I cannot tell you to spend that much money on the game that you have never played or never have seen. And however, if you own the first game and you like it, and if you have ever played any of the other Total War games and you liked it, then 100% this game is absolutely worth it, even for the full price. And again, if you own a first game and want the real definitive way to play this game, Mortal Empires is just amazing, and you should experience this 100%. And overall verdict is this: for the sale price, 100% get it. For the full price, if you can't afford it, then get it. Well, this will be it for today. Thank you for being here with me. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more videos like this one. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of this game, whether you played it or whether you enjoyed it or not, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. See ya.